Hello and welcome to WJTS in.form. I'm your host, Bill Potter. Well, we are very honored to have with us the Honorable Congressman Larry Buschon of District 8 in the studio with us. Welcome, Congressman.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Good to see you.
Oh, yeah, it's good to see you. Thank you.
We really appreciate whenever you have time and you're in the area to come in and do a show with us. And I know that you have the office in Jasper.
We do.
And so you're spending time in this area.
And yes.
Let's talk about, you're actually on recess, and some people may think, well, I remember recess when I was a kid. That means that I got to go out and play. That's not really the case for Congressmen.
No, that's not the case. What the August recess is a time where we can spend an extended period of time in our districts around the country, members of Congress, touching base with our constituents, taking meetings, listening to people about what's happening, for me specifically, here in Indiana. It's a very important time. We have a very busy schedule. You know, I've used some of that to take my kids to school, to college, which you have to do, and that's a great thing, although I hated to see two of my kids go to college this year. But most of the time we spend in the district talking to people and finding out what's happening. And without doing that, honestly, you really don't know what's happening in your area, and you can't take that information back to Washington. So we're definitely not on vacation.
Well, you know, I think when you look at the national press, there are certain things that get a lot of play. Yeah. But when you come back locally and you're talking with people, sometimes it's the small things that are important to them and underlying things.
The bottom line is, right now, when I talk to people out there, they're still concerned about the economy. Mm-hmm. They're still concerned that most of the job creation is part-time employment. Mm-hmm. People are having difficulty, employers are, in finding qualified workers because we need to upscale our workforce. Things like that. But I tell you, when you really ask people, it's the day-to-day things. It's like the cost of a gallon of gas, and that's high, that is affecting people's lives. It's the cost of food products that have been quite high, that are making it difficult for families out there. And those are the type of things I hear, and that's what we're trying to improve on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about jobs. Is one thing people are concerned about.
Yeah.
And I know you've had a lot of job fairs.
I have.
And you'll be having one here in Jasper soon.
I will be. I've had 2 job fairs so far, one in Terre Haute and one in Evansville. We're going to have a job fair soon in Vincennes and in Jasper. And those have been very good. And what we do is invite employers from around the community, and they come out, and we use the first hour generally for veterans, mm-hmm. so that they have access to employers, because as you know, veterans have a higher unemployment rate right now than the general population. But what it does is it connects employees with potential employers. And I think that's a very important role that I have as a member of Congress, is helping really the community improve and get the economy on track, get people back to work. And it's an honor to be able to do that.
I guess it's tough for everybody when there aren't people working, because I know, you know, for Indiana,
yeah,
we don't get the tax dollars.
That's correct.
Same for federal then.
That is true.
There isn't the tax dollars that come in.
That's true.
So we all work at a lower level.
That's true. When you don't have economic growth, when the economy isn't improving, and when people aren't working, it does impinge on the tax revenue for the federal government as well as the state, and that tightens our budget, mm-hmm. because we have difficulty with not having enough revenue. And I think good news is, for Indiana, we're fiscally sound in this state because of the things that have been done over the last decade to get us in good shape. Bad news is, at the federal level, we're almost $17 trillion in debt, and we continue to borrow about 40 cents of every dollar that we spend every day, and that's not a sustainable position to be in, and we're working on improving on that.
At what point can the government stop doing that? I mean, how can you stop? Is something going to break?
Well, I think it will. I think there's going to, you know, you're seeing that now. You're seeing that with very, very slow economic growth. And I think ultimately you're going to see more inflation, higher interest rates, and as people out there are more reluctant to borrow from the U.S. federal government, that's going to tighten things up even more. And I think we are in a fiscal crisis that we're going to have to get ourselves out of. We can't continue to spend money that we don't have. We're going to have some significant reform in our mandatory spending programs if we're going to get this under control. And we've probably talked about that before, mm-hmm.
With
the Medicaid program and the Medicare and those type of things. But I think we'll get it on track. I think before we have a big crisis, I think we'll get that back on track.
Have people been talking about the sequester?
Yeah.
What are feelings about that?
Well, the sequester is across-the-board spending cuts. that really does not discriminate on what should be cut and what should be increased or what should be kept the same. So I've already voted a couple of times in the House of Representatives to keep the same level of spending control, but to restructure the sequester spending and make it more targeted spending cuts. There are programs that probably need to be eliminated. There are some that need more money. There's some that need about the same. The sequester is not a good way to do that. That did come about with the debt ceiling deal in 2011, which I supported, as well as a number of others from Indiana and around the country did, because at the time we thought we'd get a big deal with the president, and the sequester wouldn't go into place. We were wrong, but that said, we need to restructure it. For this area, Crane Naval Surface Warfare Center, for example, is very dependent on what we do at the federal level as far as Department of Defense spending, and that's why we need to restructure that and make it more targeted.
Something that's always on people's minds, and it's always being discussed nowadays, is health care.
Yes.
And the Affordable Health Care Act.
Yeah.
I know as an employer, October 1st, we are to notify by law every employee about the options they have with the marketplace pricing, I guess. I can't find any details on it.
Well, I can't either, and that's a problem when I'm a U.S. member of U.S. Congress, and there's that much uncertainty out there. And the reason is because honestly, is the Health and Human Services Department, the administration, are not ready for implementation of this health care law. They've struggled with getting it implemented. I think personally, it's going to have to be further delayed. As you probably know, I thought it was a bad approach for health care in the first place as a practicing physician. I think it's bad for patients, it's bad for practitioners of medicine, it's bad ultimately for business, and I'm very concerned about it. And I think we're continuing to try to, at this point, get the administration to delay the law at a minimum so that people like yourself can know exactly what they have to do. And I think it's a struggle.
Well, with the health care, I know that in Congress, the Republicans in Congress have repeatedly tried to vote it down.
Yes, we have.
And some people say, well, they're wasting their time. And I'm sure there's another reason, not just to vote it down, but I guess to bring a light to some of the problems with it.
That's the point. I mean, I don't think it's a waste of time at all to say that, look, we don't think this is the right approach for the American people, and we do that with our votes. We voted to delay the individual mandate. The president has already delayed the business mandate. We voted multiple times to defund certain areas of the law. Before we left for the recess, we voted to take the IRS out of the health care bill, because as you may know, the IRS is the one responsible for policing the health care bill. Mm-hmm. With all the IRS problems that they have, I don't think very many people think that that's a good idea, and neither do I. So I don't think it's a waste of time at all. I think that we point out the problems with the law. Now, me personally, if you're against something, you have to be for something, right? Mm-hmm. And and the Republicans in the House have all kinds of bills and plans about what we would do for health care reform, because health care needs reformed. Mm-hmm. I'd encourage your viewers to go to my official website, buschon.house.gov, and look on there what the ideas that I have for health care reform. It's right on the front page of my website, and there's a lot of private sector ideas that I think would be more effective than the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, now, there's a lot in the news now about Syria.
Yes.
And some of this may even be a little outdated by the time we actually get this on the air. I don't know, but what are you hearing from people about the Middle East and Syria in particular?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Rank and file members of Congress probably know as much as the public does by reading the media reports at this point. I think today that the White House is going to have meetings with the leadership in the Senate and in the House in Washington, D.C., and talk about what the intelligence community is telling us about whether or not for sure that Assad used chemical weapons. And once the president briefs the leadership of both political parties in the House and the Senate, then that will come down to me. So at this point, I don't have any really insight into what's going to happen. I do know this, is that the international community, in my view, can't tolerate the use of chemical weapons against civilians. And I think that from what the President has said, the administration is convinced that Assad, the regime in Syria, has done that and not the opposition. And so we'll see. But I think there's going to have to be some reaction from the international community, including the United States.
Isn't there then some concern about Russia and China?
There is.
We're kind of opposing that.
There is, and there's a big concern about that. And I think the Russians and the Iranians are supporting the Assad regime. And so, yeah, I have some significant concerns about broadening the conflict and getting us into a bigger conflict than we should be in. I think that in this situation we need to be very careful. It is a civil war in Syria, but I do think the international community needs to point out that the use of chemical weapons, even in a civil war in a sovereign country, can't be tolerated. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the Russians, I think, do agree with that. But they're trying to buy time, I think, at this point, to try to convince the United States and others to give them more time to convince the world that Assad didn't use chemical weapons and it was actually his opponents. And so there's some disagreement there.
There's, I guess, are we so concerned about things in the Middle East because of oil? Or are there other concerns?
No, I think we're concerned about things in the Middle East because our allies are very close. We have, of course, Europe, which is very close, and around Syria we have Turkey, which has been a long-term ally of the United States. The Israelis are in a very tenuous position, and the Middle East is in a critical area for a multitude of reasons, not just because of oil production, but because of the possibility that conflict could spread into Europe and affect our allies. So I think the United States has some national interests in making sure that that area of the world is stable and that the conflict doesn't spread to our allies in the region. And so that said, I think we need to be very cautious about involving ourselves in a civil war, but we need to make sure that we get the message across. You can't use chemical weapons against your citizens.
Now you are here in Jasper and meeting with people. And before we go off the air with your interview, is there anything that you'd like to add, things that you think are significant, maybe that folks need to watch for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of significant things. I think we're working on the budgetary process, continuing to try to get the budget of the federal government balanced, and we're having ongoing discussions amongst Republicans and Democrats and the White House on how to do that. I think there's tax reform that we're working on that I'm very optimistic that we may get done, where you'll find that we can simplify the tax code, make it more easy to understand, make sure that it's fair for all income levels. And then on the corporate side, we make sure we put in a tax code that's internationally competitive so that businesses like Kimball International and others in your area can compete on the global stage and make sure that we can keep jobs here in America and build products here that we can export to other countries and use ourselves. So I think that's coming down the line. The healthcare is a big deal, and I think we'll get some action on that and some certainty for people like you and other employers this fall. I think, on the economic front, I think the regulatory climate in Washington, D.C., specifically as it relates to energy and the coal industry and others, you'll see some action on that this fall, and we're trying to work to make sure that businesses are not over-regulated and that they have the ability to expand and create jobs without the threat of regulation. So those are all the things we're working on.
And those are things we need to be watching.
We do need to be watching.
And
those.
Folks should contact you. Your
Please do.
To let you know how they feel.
Please do. We have office hours here in Jasper at the same time every month, and we advertise that in the local papers, and you can also get that information by looking on my website or calling my office. And we appreciate the interaction. Please send us emails and letters and call us and tell us what you think, because unless I hear from people, I don't know what's happening.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Congressman.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Our guest has been Congressman Larry Buschon, District 8, and we thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We are local people watching local people.